Welcome to Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me this morning on another edition of Inside Automotive right here at the CBT Automotive Network. I've got what I think is a special edition of Inside Automotive this morning. I am joined by Jay Abraham. He is a top executive coach, business leader, founder and CEO of the Abraham Group. He is also an incredible speaker that has traveled the world. That's why I'm so honored to have him sitting here across from me in the studio today. So Jay Abraham, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's my privilege, and I'm tickled. I'm eager to see the questions you'll ask.
Well, I think first and foremost, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about your background. For, as I said,
Okay.
For those people that are not familiar with you, and I'd invite you to Google him right now. I think you're going to like what you see. You've worked with the likes of Tony Robbins and so many others. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this point.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So my career is an accident. It's a total accident. So it's a little bit painful, but when I tell it, it'll make sense. So I got started at the age of 18. I was married and had 2 kids at 20.
That'll wake you up. Yeah.
It does. I wouldn't recommend it. And nobody cared, but I had the need of somebody 40 and no education. And the only people that would give me opportunity were interesting entrepreneurs who would not give me a salary, but they would give me an eat what you kill.
Okay.
So you produce, you earn. If you don't, you don't.
Right.
And
Kind
they
of
didn't,
like the car business.
Yeah, it's all performance.
Right.
It's all result based. And the best part was they didn't care if you spent a minute or all day. And so to hedge myself to make sure I made money and fed the family, I always did 5 or 6 things concurrently. And I did that for a couple of years. And all of a sudden, after a couple of years, I realized, that I should have earlier, people in one industry, Jim, don't have a clue how people in other industries think, act, transact,
Right.
strategic, the strategies, business models, distribution, access vehicles,
Sure.
positioning, differentiation. And I was able to take very common observed concepts from the industries I'd been in and started putting them together in hybrids and applying to the next and the next. And they exploded. And people thought I was brilliant. And I'm probably reasonably intelligent, but I was just a one-eyed man in the land of the blind. I was an emissary. But when I realized how powerful that concept was, I coined it funnel vision versus tunnel vision. And then I was on a mission the rest of my career to learn everything I could about everything I could.
Sure.
So early in my life, I learned about variability, I learned about optionality, and I learned about quantification. And that transformed my life. Variability means you can do something one way and it produces X. You do it another, it can produce 2X or 1/2X. You do another, it can produce 3X. You do another, it could be the 3X plus 10X on the back end. Same time, same effort, same opportunity, same access.
Right.
And that really fascinated me. Optionality means there's many ways to go at something, and most people who live in one industry only know the way everyone else does it. It's a herd mentality.
Right. Well, and I think we suffer from that in retail automotive. I say that because I kind of consider myself a car guy, but we've got those blinders on in automotive where you only know what you know in the dealership or the auto group that you're running. Maybe we go to a dealer 20 meeting where there's 19 other dealers that share ideas, but we're all still in the industry, and we don't often look outside the industry for solutions that could help us inside the industry.
And that was sort of, you just nailed it very, very beautifully. Thank you. That's the genesis of my whole career, and that is that if you look at where real great breakthroughs come from, they don't come usually from inside an industry, they come from without. And I use a bunch of examples that are really simple. Fiber optics that transformed telecommunication didn't come from telecommunication, it came from aerospace and was borrowed. FedEx created a whole industry by borrowing what's called the hub and spoke check clearing system that the Federal Reserve Bank uses so you don't bounce a check, and they applied it to delivering packages early in the morning. The ballpoint pen or roll-on deodorant, I don't remember. Rogaine came from pimple, Viagra came from heart. The biggest baby buggy manufacturer uses the collapsible wheels from airplanes. So I got on a mission to learn everything I could about all the different ways people do things, because I realized that best practices has an inherent flaw. You're talking about the dealers. So if you do the same thing as everybody else, plus or minus 10, 20%, all you can ever have is an incremental advantage over them.
Right.
But if you understand things they don't, in ways they don't, and at leverage points, upside, not dangerous, they don't, you can have it exponential. So I got focused on operating for my clients in what I call the exponential zone as opposed to the incremental zone. And it just took off. And then I got involved in strategy, business model, distribution, marketing, preemptive positioning, which is different than unique selling proposition, and reclamation of sunk cost investment. And that sort of took me all over the world.
Sure. All over the world, and in many cases with Tony Robbins. I mean, you shared the stage with him and have produced so many different conferences and seminars. And talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, well, I've had very great privilege to be involved as a mentor, an advisor, collaborating with a lot of people, Tony, Damon John, the late Stephen R. Covey. This doesn't count a lot of entrepreneurs that I've had influence over. But they were always attracted to my understanding of how to work on what's called the geometry of a business. How to make the actions you take, the efforts you make, the dollars you expend, the human capital produce far greater upside than the normal person. And so Tony was taken years ago with my 3-way to grow business model, which is how you use the power of geometry safely and very, very, very predictably to multiply performance monumentally. He was taken with my expansive belief systems, and he started adapting it to his business, and it grew his business, and then he incorporated it into a lot of his training. So I'm a fundamental part of a lot of his trainings, and he and I do a day together still, which is hilariously fun.
I bet. So as you look as an outsider into retail automotive and the dealers that are helping consumers each day, what are some of the observations that you make, and how do you see our industry in retail automotive? We know we're leaving opportunities and money on the table. This also comes at a time when the industry's coming back from COVID, when we had huge gross profits, huge net profits, tremendous volume. And now it's kind of getting back to this normalization, if you will. And every dealer out there is saying, okay, I've got my store, I've got my new cars, my used cars, my F&I, my fixed ops. How else can I make money from this operation? And I know that you are really a master at bringing that new point of view to a business.
Thank you. Yeah, so for many years, and you and I have talked about this a lot, I've lusted after the automotive field because of 3 things. First of all, it's 5 businesses or 6 businesses in one.
That's right.
But second, they have so many moving parts that lend themselves to greater upside leverage. You know, you've got leads coming in, you got conversion, you got people that you can resell, you've got all these ancillary ways to sell them, you've got all these residual ways to monetize them, you've got the cross-selling. And I think that not the problem, but the opportunity is that most dealers that I've ever met, and I've met some of the big ones, and you know that I know a couple of them, and I've influenced some. They get to a point where they do very, very well, but they get to what I say is successfully stuck. They don't know how much more they can get out of, advertising, out of a lead, out of salespeople, out of the relationship, out of the brand, out of the 5 interrelated activities. And that's what I do for a living, is show people that, hey, again, you can change one variable in a marketing or advertising approach and it can double or redouble. And the variability, if you have lots of different variability in salespeople, there's mechanisms where you can figure out what the best ones do that the others don't, and you can incorporate all these attributes. I come from a world where most people, Jim, think in terms of KPIs. Everyone has KPIs.
That's right.
And they're usually a finite number, and everyone looks at the same ones, but there's a myriad more OPIs. Those are called overlooked performance indicators, and they exist in between the things you measure and the beginning and the end. You know how you start, where you go to source, what you do after the sale is completed. Just to give you an example, it fascinates me that in your field, in automotive, people get excited about a lower cost of acquiring a prospect, whatever you call it. But they don't understand that all leads aren't worth the same, all sources aren't worth the same, all ads don't produce the same. So if you allocate the same relative value to different value assets, it makes no sense.
Right.
I come from a world where I can understand that different people excel at different things. We've talked about how one salesman or woman might be great at a new car sale or at a first-time buyer, but not good at a truck.
Yeah.
And yet, because of the democratization or the democratizing of sales, you get the next up, I get the next. Whereas
Right.
if you get a truck buyer and you can sell first-time ones, great, and I can sell trucks, but I get a first-timer, the asset that the dealership has invested in is being suboptimized.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I just look
You'd
at all kinds
want
of things
that
like
truck up to go to somebody that's really good with
theoretically,
trucks, and
yeah.
right, yeah, vice versa.
And we've talked about this. I mean, there's some very logical things people don't always look at. And again, I'm not getting into technology. I'm just getting into assets you've already invested in that could be yielding a lot more. But in business, there is a myriad of levers that nobody really even sees, let alone seizes. And the fixation that I have and what my particular specialty has been is no more investment, no more risk, just a lot more current and residual yield, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure it does. Sure. And I think a lot of dealers that are listening and managers that are listening feel as though there's a lot more opportunity in what they do each day and the operations that they run. Sometimes it's hard for them to figure out where they are. And you get caught up in the minutiae of running your dealership, and there might even be some comfortability there saying, hey, listen, all said and done, we did pretty good last month, right? Maybe we
Yes.
made $1 million on our bottom line, or $500,000, or whatever the number is that works at your dealership. And what's so wrong with that, right? Do a lot of business owners fall into that to say, hey, I'm good with this bottom number, and why should I look for other areas in my operation?
And the answer is yes, they do. But if they understand, I mean, if you're in business to optimize the yield you can get on every asset that you invest in.
Right.
There's two kinds of businessmen or women. There's a 2D investor and there's a 3D. Very different. A 2D looks at revenue minus expense, profit, and it's a static, singular sort of a way. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're making $1 million a month. But a 3D looks at all the residual yield they can get out of that. How much more yield? It's like a PE firm would look at it. How much more can you get out of that buyer? How much more can you get out of that salesperson? I don't mean squeezing them. I mean developing and monetizing and maximizing and multiplying. And they don't really have a context of understanding. We just had lunch. And I was talking about soft skills that nobody understands. And I've helped all these people. There's probably 10 or 15 soft skills, cost no more. They just need to be incorporated into a person that's interacting. You can show somebody strategic communication, how to enunciate, how to articulate, cadence, pausing, that makes their credibility and their authority 2 or 3 times more. It's been measured, quantified.
Sure.
You can be more fascinating, interesting, and that can help impact and result sometimes 200% separate. Stephen M. R. Covey, who's he's the son of Stephen R. Covey, the person who wrote The 7 Habits. He's done seminal research on trust building, business trust building. Everyone thinks they have commanding trust, but the truth is most of them don't. There's 13 simple characteristics that if you can master those, and your salespeople can master those, and your managers can master those, you're going to get up to 300% more buy-in, shortened sales cycle, more probability, more collaboration. But most people don't even teach this, and most people that live in a very successful but a very, very insular world only know what they know. Right. And best practices has a fallacy. If you're the first one that learns it, until everyone else does, you have a little window of opportunity. When everybody else learns it, it's not best practice, it's standard operating procedure.
Good point.
You can have ancillary income and more utility value. How many different, well, I'll give you an example. Hopefully, every dealer that is watching gets some amount of their business from referrals. Would you imagine that?
Of course.
If they don't,
Yes.
there's something wrong with his picture.
That's right.
But I have done enough worldwide experiments. Almost nobody has in place even one formalized, systematized, referral generating strategy that everybody adheres to, other than, hey, we'll give you $50 if you give us one. We've studied 1,000 industries. I've uncovered 125 different strategies for generating no cost, high value, high convertive, higher profit referrals. And nobody even understands that it costs nothing. it's the best of all worlds, because a referral generated buyer, just as an example, they're going to negotiate less. They're going to
That's right.
they're going to
That's
buy
right.
faster. They're going to buy more
Every time.
things. They're
Every
going
time. You're gonna
to be
make
more
more money.
enjoyable to
Right.
deal with. They're going to buy more often.
Right.
They're going to refer more people, and they cost you nothing.
That's
Whereas
right.
somebody for the outside, all you're generating the first time is what I call it's hesitant trust.
Yeah.
They don't know who you are,
That's right.
and they're going to, even
That's
if you
right.
do the transaction, they don't trust
That's
you.
right. And
But if-
maybe what brought them in was some crazy low number
Yeah.
in your advertising that they're going to try to stick to anyway, and they're there for that reason. And if you happen to build a relationship with them, great.
Yeah.
But they're there for that low number, or maybe the one vehicle that no other dealer has. You're probably going to get that customer anyway. But yeah, there's no doubt that every dealer would agree you make most of your money on referral
Yeah,
business.
and it's the most profitable, but nobody looks at it as a profit center that can be managed and executed with far more yield and far more predictability. If you're getting right now 5 or 10% of your sales, they're going to be much more profitable. If you turn that into 15, what's that do to your bottom line?
Right.
My typical advice is you should have what I call a power Parthenon. Many different pillars of access to the market. Certainly digital marketing is primary, but you could have so many other ones. And I don't have any graphics here, but I came from the world that says if you increase performance of many different functions by just 10%, it's not 10%. It multiplies. 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. So going to exponential in performance of a process in the revenue system is not that hard. But if you're content with where you are, you can be, what I said, successfully stuck. And who's to say it's bad if you're making $1 million a month in gross? But what if you could be making $1.7 million? And what if that would set up much more predictably the repeat? And what if twice as many people, use service? I mean, what if you could do all those things?
Sure. And as you know, we suffer from a low retention rate in service. Less than 30% of the people that buy a car at a dealership bring that vehicle back to have the service done on that car. And that's something that has been around for a while, and every dealer struggles with that. And we're all asking ourselves, what can we do in the industry? There's all of these factors, but the biggest is that it's the perception from many consumers that it's costs more money and it takes a longer period of time, right? And yet, that's not always the case. Oftentimes it's not more expensive, and oftentimes the dealer can get the vehicle out as quick as maybe one of the independents can.
Yeah, and there's many ways to compensate. Whatever the problem is, and we talked about this at lunch, there's a concept called the Aikido School of Marketing. And Aikido is a martial arts that uses the power of the enemy against the enemy. You can take almost any negative objection and you can turn it into a positive. For example, there's a concept called preemptive marketing. It's been used many times, but if nobody tells you all the functions that go on when they perform a service, and you take the time to talk about the fact that your service person had 10 years and keeps going back, and that they basically can identify issues way before it becomes an expensive problem, and they basically, and the parts are designed to last 5 times more hypothetically than because it's OEM, and you do all these things, you build this higher perception of value, but nobody teaches them how to do that.
Right. It's crazy. And sometimes they don't know that because they're not exposed to other industries. They're not exposed to other ways. Not everybody, but many of the people that run dealerships were brought up in the dealership business. Many of them are actually the children of dealers,
Yes.
and such. But so I think we do have, as I said earlier, this set of blinders on in retail automotive, that we even only look to the other highly successful dealers to get the answers.
Yes.
When in reality, we need to be looking in many cases outside.
Well, that's where
as I said,
breakthroughs
to
come
see
from.
what other industries are doing to be successful and to drive more sales and more profit.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, but again, it's a very complex business. There's a lot to manage, a lot of compliance, and I acknowledge that, but there are so many assets that I think could be leveraged so much higher for no more time. Again, the key to me is no more time, effort, risk, investment just much more current and future yield.
Yeah.
I mean, that's possible.
More of a focus on the business at hand and what you're doing currently, and then all of the different avenues that you're not exploring currently that don't cost you any more money. To switch gears a little bit
Certainly.
with you, and that is the current state of our economy right now. There's a lot of dealers out there that are very concerned. I know you've seen in your time a lot of different ups and downs in business.
Yes.
If you were in, you are in business today, what advice do you have for dealers that are looking at this going, okay, there's so much uncertainty. I know that that's a very overused term today, but it is what it is. I mean, it's uncertainty, in the dealer community coming out of DC with tariffs and our economy. What advice do you have for these dealers out there that are concerned?
Well, you've got to be very concentrated on what I'll call residual value. How much more you're going to get out of that buyer, how often, how much more you're going to get out of that relationship, because you got that sunk cost. The good news is people aren't going to stop buying cars.
Yeah.
But you're going to have a much more significant positioning proposition in order to attract if there's a lesser amount. Mm-hmm. And I think that value is a very interesting concept. It means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times what we think is a value, you don't.
Right.
So I think it's going to be, I was going to say this, it's interesting to me that your industry will invest, however you want to say it, $100 to get someone to walk in the door, and maybe every 3 or 4 of them buy, so it's $400 or whatever it is, and they would spend or invest $10 a year to maintain that relationship when they've already got a relationship, a predisposed, trusted relationship, because they did the deal, and they're going to go out to the next new one. And so I think you've got to really learn how to maximize and sustain the relationships you bring in the door. And I don't know that that's really top of mind to everybody. I think it's probably driven by the factories, but I think there's many ways that you can achieve that.
I think it's coming it's come a long way, especially in the sense that more people are doing more with first-party data that's in there.
Oh yeah, it's fabulous what you can understand, and how just the data tells you all kinds of things that are
dealers
phenomenal.
are doing way more with it today than they did 5 or 10 years ago.
And there's all kinds of wonderful service providers who understand the correlations, and they can interpret it and they can actuate. Yeah, I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, and especially for dealers that, in some cases, it's the answer to an exorbitant ad budget, because they don't necessarily need to spend as much money on advertising if they're taking care of the thousands of people that are currently in their database.
And over time, I mean, if your strategy is properly reverse engineered, again, if right now you know what your percentage of repeats are, if you can increase that 10%, it's profound. If you can get them to use one more service, it's profound. If you can basically get them to refer one more person, it's profound.
That's right. Yeah, it just keeps continuing to multiply, right? The 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. We have this really interesting slide that I used when I used to do seminars, and it takes a hypothetical company. I'll give it to you. You can show it. It's got 1,000 buyers who buy a $100 unit of sale and come back 2 times a year as a reference, and you see that it's $200,000. If you only increase those 3 categories, the number of buyers, the size of the transaction, and thus the profit, and the frequency or utility, how many other ways you can monetize them ethically, by 10%, it's not 10%, it's 33 1/3. If you double those numbers, if you took 1,000 and made it 2,000, if you took a $100 unit of sale and made it 200, if you took 2 turns a year, 2 transactions, you made it 4, it's not doubling, it's 800%, and what comes to the bottom line is profound. So understanding the geometry of business, I would think, has a lot of upside if the dealers really embrace it, I think.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question about it. Any final words of advice for dealers? As somebody that has worked with so many companies and so many industries out there, really throughout the world, as you see retail automotive today, any final thoughts, any suggestions as we go into the second half of 2025?
Yeah, I was trained in optimization, highest and best use theory. Mm-hmm. But you can't optimize if you don't have a context of understanding of the other options, alternative possibilities, choices, approaches that are available, and what they are capable of producing. So what I tell everybody is, traveling, everyone is, I'm sure every dealer's traveled, certainly outside their city, outside their state, outside of the continent. And when you do that, it broadens your mind. Travel outside your industry. Study how other industries approach the same generic functions that you do, because there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, and many of them are safer, faster, more powerful, and most of them are not even understood by your competitors.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. Travel outside your industry. I love it. That's a great piece of advice. Jay Abraham, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
My honor.
Very much
Thank
appreciated. Hopefully that you're a new staple here at CBT
Thank you.
News.
I'd love that.
I know a lot of business owners have taken your advice and done very, very well from it. So hopefully we can bring you into the auto industry if you're agreeable, and you can help dealers.
I would love it. Thank you.
Automotive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.